Hello, everyone. How are you guys doing? It's great to be here. So, I got about 30 slides in roughly 1,200 seconds, so bear with me. I'll start by defining a few concepts, and then I'll move on to some examples that will help you better understand the meaning behind those ideas. Cool. So, just a few words about me before we get started. So, I've started several tech startups. I'm an angel investor in early stage tech startups, and I'm an engineer at heart. So, cool. When I first got the invitation to speak here today, I was at first pretty hesitant. I remember looking over the thesis, over the topic of the conference, and one thing that particularly stood out and puzzled me was creativity. Now, my initial reaction, and I'm sure most of you, or at least many of you, had the exact same reaction, was to subconsciously ask myself, why the heck would I care about creativity? I mean, I'm not an artist, I'm not a songwriter. My job doesn't require that much creativity, right? But then I actually thought about it. And as I was rationalizing this topic, I realized that creativity means so much more. I started reflecting on the most creative and the most impactful moments of my life, such as the business opportunities I came up with, or the relationships that I fostered over the years, or the most impactful career decisions I took. And looking back at all those moments now, I can attribute most of my successes, both personally and professionally, to the creative thinking culture that I enforced on myself. But before we jump into the main topic of this presentation, which is how you can hack creativity, I would first like to talk a bit about why you would want to do this. Why would you want to become a creative person in the first place? And the truth is that there is no universal answer to this question. However, I'll assume that most of you, or many of you, are involved in business, or at least have some sort of interest in business. So with that in mind, here's the number one reason why you would greatly benefit from cultivating this ability. Creativity is what fuels big ideas. It's what challenges employees' way of thinking, and it's what ultimately opens up the door to new opportunities. In business, creativity breeds innovation. Whether you're an entrepreneur or a marketer or an engineer or a project manager, whatever you do, understanding the core value of creative thinking is what will set you apart from the vast majority of your peers. So, what if you've never thought of yourself as a creative person? How do you get started? How do you become a creative individual? And here's where the idea of the 24/7 creativity hack came in place. So, after rationalizing, after aggregating and conceptualizing all the details that go into making up a creative mindset, I've basically narrowed everything down to one specific solution, to one hack that will ultimately cultivate your creativity. Habits. And you may be wondering, what the hell do habits have to do with creativity? But it turns out that creativity is all about habits. So the idea of the 24/7 creativity hack is that it's actually a series of habits that work together to promote creative thinking and maximize your creative output. The first habit in the series is the producer mindset. You need to make the switch from a consumer mindset to a producer mindset. At the end of the day, we're all consumers. We spend our days listening, reading, eating, buying. We buy stuff we don't need just to make us feel better. We work so we can afford the newest clothes or the newest car or the best dinners out. We're stuck in a constant consumption of newer and better things. But as cliche as it may sound, none of that will add true happiness to our lives. True happiness comes from carving out your own path. It comes from the confidence that you can succeed in your goal, and from seeing that confidence and that goal materialize. That's why, as long as you remain only a consumer, you'll never reach the fulfillment you desire. Why? Well, because the consumer can never get enough, and they will always look at the world through the lens of what they can get from it instead of what they can give back to it. Producers, on the other hand, they strive to make something valuable to others. They receive their payment not only monetarily, but also through the confidence that they don't require anyone else to survive in this world. And the cool part is that you don't have to produce and sell millions of products or services in order to get started. You can start with the small things. You can put up a blog post and help others that are going through experiences you've already gone through, or small stuff like that. Now, here's one of my favorite thinking exercises. Next time you're in a grocery store, adopt the habit of looking at products through the eyes of the seller. Ask yourself questions like, why did why did the seller pick those ingredients, or why did they chose this packaging or that price? And then also analyze how other people interact with those products. Notice which brands they commonly pick, or if the price influences their choices. So you can actually apply this thinking exercises to many other categories, not just in grocery stores. You can apply it to software products, even Amazon products, by looking at the reviews page, or even books in a library. What this thinking exercise will ultimately do, it's not only is it gonna keep you striving to find better ways to solve problems or improve existing experiences, but ultimately it will allow you to see how other top performers in this group do it and learn from their execution and their experience. Now, speaking about grocery stores, here's a great story on how adopting this producer mindset would actually can actually change your life and create a meaningful impact in your community, and who knows, later on, maybe in the entire world. So a couple of years ago, a good friend of mine was shopping at Whole Foods. Now, at this time, he had this very weird obsession with chicken broth. And to be honest, I mean, it's not the worst obsession to have. Chicken broth is great for your skin. It fights infection, heals your gut, reduces inflammation. You get the idea. So it's pretty healthy. Now, the caveat with chicken broth is that it's not only very hard to cook at home, it takes a lot of time, but it also has to be consumed within 3 days, and that's a pretty big inconvenience for many reasons. And as you may imagine, it was an inconvenience for my friend because he lived pretty far away from the market, so going back every usually 3 days was pretty significant pain in the ass. So he decided to do something about it, which is actually the very first step in the producer mindset and the most essential one, taking action. He decided to experiment with ways to create prepackaged broth that would actually last way longer than 3 days. And also, he realized that since chicken broth was gaining popularity in the health community thanks to its benefits, there had to be many other people that share the exact same inconvenience caused by this very short shelf life. So, also, it's worth mentioning that my friend had absolutely no background in the food industry whatsoever. In fact, he's still a great marketer, but that doesn't have anything to do with the food industry, right? So in his own kitchen, he started experimenting with different ingredients. Unfortunately, that didn't really lead anywhere. He was able to increase the shelf life by a few days by adding certain preservatives and additives, but ultimately that impacted some of the nutrients in the drink, which would basically negate most of the health benefits. So that wasn't really an option. But he didn't stop there. He researched the industry and found out that no one was actually selling prepackaged broth, and that really intrigued him. He dug deeper into the reasons why the broth would go bad in the first place and realized that it wasn't actually an issue with the cooking process, but it was related to the way the broth was stored after it was cooked. So, long story short, the contact with the oxygen would actually change the molecular structure of some of the nutrients in the broth, which as I said, would negate most of the benefits. So the only way to properly preserve it would be to vacuum seal the broth while it was still hot, fresh off the stove. So that's what he planned on doing. He reached out to multiple food packaging companies, looking to find one that would be able to properly seal the broth. Nonetheless, he was able to partner with a great facility that was not only able to meet all those requirements, but they also got back with very helpful suggestions for improvements, such as lining the inside of the packaging with a thin layer of heat-resistant polymer, which would basically avoid any sort of contact or leaching between the packaging and the broth itself. So therefore, he was able to increase the shelf life from the 3 days that you get out of the broth from the store to 3 years. And that's quite an improvement. Now, the rest of the story is that his marketing background really helped later on. He was able to incorporate and found a business around his invention. He was able to take his broth nationwide, revolutionize this entire market, and now the company is worth over $50 million as we speak. Now, I think this is a quintessential example of how this producer mindset can breed innovation and how creativity in general can breed innovation. It would have been extremely easy for my friend to just accept his consumer status and become complacent about this inconvenience. Instead, he challenged the status quo, and he decided to do something about it and take action. This is why I think the producer mindset will not only radically change the way you view your day-to-day activities, the products you use or consume on a daily basis, but it will also impact the way you perceive your purpose, both in your personal as well as in your professional life. So that is the producer mindset. The second habit is practicing out-of-the-box thinking. Now, let's talk a bit about what this box actually is. This box is a combination of direct and indirect experiences. This metaphorical box is actually a combination of things that you have discovered and things that other people have discovered. All those experiences, our successes, our failures, as well as the people we surround ourselves with, make up the boundaries of our creative thinking. They make up the boundaries of this box. And to better illustrate this, let's take a look at PayPal, which I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, are familiar with. Specifically, let's take a look at the people behind PayPal. Now, in Silicon Valley, the founders and early employees of PayPal are commonly referred to as the PayPal Mafia. Why? Well, because the vast majority of them went on to create immensely successful companies in a shorter time period than any other group in history. We're talking about companies like Tesla, LinkedIn, YouTube, Sequoia Capital, Yelp, and so on. Not only that, but they were also at the inception, as investors, they were also at the inception of huge companies like Facebook or Uber or Lyft or Airbnb. So that wasn't a coincidence by any means, and it actually ties back to the same idea we were just talking about, specifically the importance of surrounding yourself with people that constantly challenge the status quo and look for out-of-the-box ways to solve problems. So how do we do that? How do we think out of the box? And naturally, us as humans are not designed to think out of the box. Staying within the box provides a subconscious sense of safety and comfort. Anything that is outside the box, it's invisible to us. Now, at the end of the day, reality is out there for us to perceive it. Whenever we think about a specific thing, we have ideas, we have requirements, we have specifications, and we know how things are because that's the way they always have been. But if we want to think out of the box, we need to add something more. That is usually a combination of blind confidence, absurdity, and something that might seem irrelevant at that time. But we need all those ingredients in order to make the switch, to make the cross within our minds from what we know to what we haven't yet thought of. Now, a common pitfall in thinking out of the box is actually underestimating yourselves. As a society, we tend to label successful inventors of our time as exceptions from an intellectual point of view or even from the point of view of luck. Now, we tend to think of Steve Jobs, for example, as God. Mark Zuckerberg is a rare genius, right? Elon Musk is Iron Man. And those are just some of the very high-profile examples. But we tend to apply the same sort of labeling mechanism into our smaller circle of friends and peers, which basically drags down our own self-confidence, right? So without a doubt, those are highly accomplished and intelligent individuals, but they weren't born that way. In fact, the vast majority of them started from the same place, and most of them are just as vulnerable as we are. The point is, thinking out of the box actually implies, by definition, that our rationale is different from everyone else's. It implies that we're seeing things, we're seeing opportunities that other people don't. And that's why I think it requires a pretty significant amount of self-confidence in order to unleash our true creative and tear down the walls of this box. So that is practicing out-of-the-box thinking. One more thing I would add here is that at the end of the day, even if you don't end up hitting such huge home runs or even if you don't want to hit such home runs like building the next Tesla or Facebook, adopting this habit will force you to look at problems and experiences from unique angles and will still enforce a pretty good level of creativity and innovation on your rationale, which will still get you pretty far. Or to put it in a more pragmatic way, aim for the moon, and even if you miss, you'll still land among the stars. Now, the third and last habit is seeking knowledge. This is what might apparently seem pretty self-explanatory. I'm sure we all agree that cultivating creativity is not something that happens overnight, and it's definitely not something that happens by itself. It doesn't develop itself. right? So one common misconception is that knowledge by itself, it's enough, but we still need to combine that knowledge with something else, and that something else is information. We need information. Again, the catch when it comes to knowledge, as it's now easier than ever to find that knowledge, to find that information, is to, thanks to obviously the tech evolution, our job here becomes to filter through all the extra noise in order to reach that essential and genuine piece of information and absorb it. Again, knowledge without information is useless. You need, for example, if you want to bake a cake, having knowledge is not enough. You need information like the list of ingredients, or you also need information to make wise decisions like the tastes and the likes of the consumers of the cake. So that's why I really think that knowledge and information need to go together in order to add it to this creativity mix. So that's the catch here with knowledge. Now let's get practical for a second. How should you go about finding those sources of knowledge and information, and how should you consume them? Well, I think this vastly depends on your creative interests. For example, photographers obviously spend a lot of time admiring the work of other photographers and inspire from their shots. If you're a marketer or a salesperson, you might want to identify the top performers in your market and try to analyze their work and identify the habits that they apply in their day-to-day activity and job. As an angel investor, I'm always connected to startup founders and the tech communities I'm interested in, and I'm always up to date with the latest news and updates in the tech industry, obviously. But to cultivate this long-lasting, powerful knowledge, you need something more, and that is diverse information. The more you open yourself up to acquiring information way beyond your main area of interest, even if it might seem boring at first, it will undoubtedly help you later on, because subconsciously your mind will connect the dots in this creative thinking process. And the fact that you have information from multiple areas will definitely help and facilitate this process. So that is seeking knowledge. And I would love to talk way more about habits and the power that they have. And personally, I think that habits are one of the extremely powerful mechanisms that is probably the low-hanging fruit in terms of what you can apply today in your life in order to create the most significant impact in your career or in your personal life. We're only able to touch up on creativity today and how we can apply habits and creativity, but I highly recommend you to check out Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which goes into depth on how you can implement habits in your day-to-day life to maximize the metrics that you want to perform better at. So building habits, especially good habits, is definitely not an easy thing to do, that's for sure. By definition, it takes time and quite a bit of self-discipline, right? But just as brushing your teeth every day feels mandatory and it feels natural, all those habits become second nature at some point. And just as one of my favorite quotes goes, you don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great, right? The best day to start was yesterday, and the second best day to start is today. Thank you.